going to resume our session. We're going to move on the second block on personalized and precision medicine. Many of the things we have already seen were related to the digital world and how to apply it, since it is a disruption in medicine. And in order to resume the session, we will have José Francisco Tomás Martínez, the chair of this roundtable. So without further ado, you have the floor. Well, while everyone takes their seats, I'm going to talk about the title of this roundtable, which is named Disruption in Personalized Preventive Medicine. We have listened for many years, the future is coming, and now the future is here. 5 or 10 years ago, we used to talk about personalized medicine, and maybe we didn't even know what we were talking about. And now we're talking about preventive personalized medicine, which is a name for a concept that we may not completely understand. The first thing I want to make clear is the way we want to practice medicine. When we're talking about a central care in patients, 15 or 20 years ago, we were talking about the social environment of the patient, of the person, in a more psychological way, in order to better understand the person. When we are talking nowadays about personalized medicine, is to better understand the disease within a specific person. And this is the way we should tackle most of diseases. This roundtable is divided into 2 parts. We're going to talk about oncology because it's the field where improvements have been made. And we have Rafael Lopez, the Chief of Oncology Service and Translational Oncology Group in the University Hospital of Santiago de Compostela. And we also have a very serious person with a brilliant career behind his back. He's going to speak about liquid biopsy in precision oncology, which is an example of the future is coming, and the future is coming, and the future is already here. The second speaker is Carlos Cortijo Bringas. He is what many of us would have wanted to be if we had been brave enough. He studied pharmacology. I don't know if I think he established a chemist shop first, and now he is devoted to research. He is the CEO of Gene Tracer, which is a very nice name for a company. I know that your company had carried out many promising studies, and we would like you to share your insights. And finally, we will have Rafael Canton Moreno, who is head of microbiology service in the teaching hospital of Ramón y Cajal in Madrid. He's an expert in communicable diseases in Spain. And I think you're here because of me. Because recently, I don't fully understand the concept, because the microbiome seems to solve every problem. So we were talking about the talk, and I told Domingo, we need a person to explain this to us. a person who explains if this is going to contribute to personalized medicine. So I wanted to have an expert in microbiome. So this will be the first roundtable. So without further ado, Rafael, you have the floor. I am going to be very strict with time. So whenever you see me with my hand this way, it means that you are overcoming your time. Thank you very much and good morning to everyone. I am going to speak about liquid biopsy and to explain if it is actually the key of precision oncology. As a person from Galicia, it depends. I will hope to convince you with my talk. So first of all, we are forced to show transparency, and these are my interest conflicts that I may have. First of all, this is my group, my research group, a part of it because we never managed to gather all together because we are traveling all the time, and this year we're going to hold the fifth liquid biopsy symposium. If we look back, and if we try to forecast what the future will look like, liquid biopsy started in the Second World War. The oncology back then was devastating. It was a kind of war. Today, we are developing drugs which are impressive, which are very accurate and have a very complex structure. We were talking before about robotics surgery, and in the field of drugs we are making more progress. But the important thing is the advancement in knowledge. When we started with oncology, all cells were similar. We treated the tumor, regardless of what it was, as a primary tumor. It is as if we are watching TV and we see the North Korea army and we think they are all similar. They are all alike, with the same uniform. They are all short, they are Chinese, and they are bad people. This was the tumor for us. Today, the tumor is like this room where no two persons are alike. I am not talking about primary tumor only, I'm talking about metastases. And each metastasis is also unique, because when we do sequencing, all of them are different. They may have minor differences, but they are different anyway. And then also the relationship doctor-patient has changed. There was mercy, but nowadays we have iPads, AI, smartphones. I cannot answer the question of how my field will be like in 10 years, because I don't even know how it will be like in 5 years. So what are the challenges of oncology? I think we can summarize them here. Cancer starts in one single cell. For a long period of time, even years, this cell transforms into 1 million of cells, which is 1 cubic centimeter. This is where the diagnosis is made, and this is where we reach the patient. So 30 times it is hidden, and we are not able to diagnose it, because in cancer, size matters. We are able to heal minor injuries. This is the biggest tumor we can heal in a mouse. This is a size compared to the size of a mouse tumor in comparison with a human tumor. These are global data. When it is smaller, 90% of survival rate. When it is bigger, the survival rate is 60%, and if it is metastatic cancer, metastasizing cancer, the survival rate is very low. So localized tumors are quite well healed. 90% of deaths are due to metastasizing cancer. And how are they produced? We discovered it very recently due to some cells that separate from the primary tumor, migrate through blood vessels, and arrive at a different location. They have certain features. All tumor cells are different. If we analyze cell by cell, we will find they are completely different. And obviously, this makes the system even more complicated. And in addition to this, they evolve, they change. Our current idol is Darwin with his theory of evolution, because everything evolves in this life. Some years ago, my hair was completely black, and nowadays my hair is almost white, as everyone in this room. To explain it in a very easy way, this is a clinical case of Mass General, where a lung cancer received treatment. It evolved. Crizotinib was given to the patient, and he was introduced in some clinical trials, and it failed. Then another treatment which failed, another experimental treatment which was similar and gave a response. And then the patient received another treatment and started to respond. And we couldn't understand why. This is the clonal evolution of this tumor. These are the clones which appear over time. You can see that with lorlatinib, there is a clone which makes the tumor sensitive to the first drug used on the patient. This was almost a miracle back then. But how can we analyze this? We need to monitor the tumor in a continuous way. There is no other way of doing things. We need to do it with biopsies, with liquid biopsies. What is a liquid biopsy? It consists of analyzing the tumor on the blood of the patient or on other fluids, body fluids, such as urine, saliva, and so on. But we need to analyze it with new technologies. We cannot have a biochemistry analysis on a blood sample. We need to use the new technologies which are ever-changing. We're not going to compare a traditional tissue biopsy with a liquid biopsy, because both are complementary. Liquid biopsy is non-invasive. Tissue biopsy cannot find the metastasis in cancer, but it was very good for local treatment. It is essential to have a tissue biopsy. However, for everything else, we need to carry out a liquid biopsy, which is the one which is going to establish the treatment plan for the patient. But in order to do so, we need to change our mindset, because until now we were treating tumors and patients in a similar way. It was an inaccurate, imprecision medicine. So the same drug for everyone, and some patients did respond to those treatments and some others didn't. But now we need to change our way of working. We need to choose patients that can respond to a certain drug. So where is the liquid biopsy right now? As the moderator, as the chair said, it is an actual thing, a real thing. Some of us already have the Tesla car. Some countries use horses, and however, we have self-driving cars and flying cars in some Arab countries. The complexity of the liquid biopsy, in addition to technology development, is that we are looking at a needle in a haystack. Regarding liquid biopsy, there are three techniques: ADN and ossisomes, and RNA, and then the CTCs, which will be the next talk. Everyone has normal DNA in their blood, but since tumors produce DNA, this DNA ends up in the bloodstream, and with technology we can now find this in the bloodstream. The glucose is somewhere around here, and we are at this level, at a very low level of nanograms, and it has many challenges. The liquid biopsy faces a technology challenge, an economic challenge, because the price can vary from €200 to a very complex one, up to €5,000. We have just started a project which will analyze a patient at a cost of €25,000, and that is a very complex analysis, but very expensive. And of course, it also has clinical and ethical challenges, because hereditary alterations will be diagnosed through liquid biopsy very soon. We will find those patients and will send them to genetic advice. Those are the most important technologies that we have today. We're going to move on to the next generation. And the difference between these technologies and the new generation ones is that PCR techniques is like fishing, and we know what we're going to fish. Next generation is a network that gives us all the information, which obviously is going to be more difficult to interpret. And then we have new phenomena. As sensitivity is getting low, well, when I was in college, a mutation was equaled cancer. However, nowadays there are some mutations that appear over time, which are very similar to age. And what are its applications? These are all the applications in every field of medicine, from prevention to diagnosis to treatment. Obviously, the most important field is oncology, but it is going to extend to other fields in medicine. We also need to monitor the treatment, because it is already very useful. We are now predicting the response of patients of lung cancer and mutations in EGFR. After 15 days, we already know if the patient is going to respond. And if the patient is not going to respond, then we can change the treatment. And if we know what mutation is not responding to the treatment or is showing reluctance to the treatment, such as in this lung cancer, where we find all the two mutations over its progression. This is the tumor dynamics. We are monitoring it in real time, and it is one of the main advantages of liquid biopsy. Another advantage is that we need to identify the target to treat some patients. And here is where mutation of T790 comes into play. It is a resistance mutation, and nowadays there is a drug which targets directly this mutation. Here we can see that the advantage of liquid biopsy is 80% of plastic tissue and 70% of CTCs. And the first example that we found in solid oncology was the rash in colon cancer. We didn't have many ways of identifying rash, and this is the result of a collaboration group. The next application, which will be very useful, is the risk estimation of relapse, the minimal residual disease. In solid oncology, we didn't know what disease the patient was going to have after the treatment, and we treated them all in the same way with clinical data. These were the separations between patients with good prognosis and bad prognosis. According to the data that we have today, when we incorporate mutations found in liquid biopsy, you may notice how the curves are separated. Those patients are going to respond wrongly, and if we lower these, they will die. We may give them additional treatments. Those over here do not need any additional treatments because their prognosis is very promising. We don't have it developed yet fully, but in many years we will have breast cancer, prostate cancers, lung cancers, and colorectal cancers. And finally, this is the dream of everyone, the early detection, the fact of having screening and early diagnosis methods before reaching 1 billion cells, 1 cubic centimeter. That way we will be able to eradicate cancer in a more efficient way. This is a study by the Baltimore group with 16 genes and 8 proteins in a liquid biopsy which is being commercialized. It had an advantage. The cost, which is $500. It has a sensitivity between 69 and 98%, which is a very high sensitivity in these frequent tumors, such as breast, lung, stomach, liver, ovary. Those are the most frequent cancers. And it gives very low false positives with a specificity of over 99%. Finally, the Californian group, there is a new Grial company, and in order to see the differences between the States and Spain, in 1 week, they got 1 billion people, $1 billion, thanks to all the people that are devoted to technology in California. They are carrying out a project whose results are already being published. These results were presented in an American Congress, and they will be they were recently presented in Barcelona. And they are able to recognize the 20 or 22 most frequent tumors with a blood test, incorporating all modern technologies with high sensitivity, and also incorporating machine learning and AI. because without it, we cannot really see final results. Here you can see how we detect tumors depending on their stage. So big tumors are, all big tumors are detected. However, there are frequent tumors which do not have a very easy screening complex, such as the case of colorectal cancer and pancreas cancer, which is over 60% of initial tumors. And again, this project gave very low false positive with a precision of 99.4%. Obviously, this is not the end of it. We are talking about alterations at this level, and at the following level is the epigenomics. So who controls the controller? And then we have other levels, and all of them will be incorporated into the liquid biopsy in a relatively fast and complex way. This will enable us to understand why a small mutation makes the structure of the drug change, because those minor changes allow the entry of a new drug. And this happens in a very dynamic way. That is why we need to keep a look on it. In Barcelona last month, the first project on the utility of liquid biopsy on lung cancer was presented. It was a next-generation Roche case where they only used liquid biopsy and not tissue biopsy, and it showed better outcomes than with tissue biopsies in lung cancer patients. This will help us change our way of doing things. Before, we used to use the hand of treatment, and now we need to use the hand of early diagnosis and selection, because in precision medicine we need to take into account all the genetic alterations, in addition to alterations in environment and lifestyle of the patient. To conclude with, liquid biopsy has many applications. We are currently focused on monitoring treatment and in real time and to target tumors. The risk estimation will be the next use in oncology, and in a very few years, screening and early diagnosis will be a very important tool in this field. But in order to achieve that, we need a revolution in the world of physicians, but also in the world of authorities, in the way of carrying out clinical trials, and in the way we design technology. At the end of the day, I am facing such complexity, and I always try to remind myself about Darwin, that we need to move forward. My beloved Rosalia, a writer, said, "From here I see a way that I don't know where it takes me. I would like to be able to walk it." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rafael. You have been very good with timekeeping, so we are now doing 2 minutes better than we did before. Carlos will tell us about the other way of detecting circulating tumor cells in early cancer diagnosis. Thank you so much. Thank you very much to the speakers and to all of you, because you're here listening to us very attentively. Now, this is a great challenge for all of us, and we are affected directly by this because for many of us, we are directly affected by this. We have now on the table the possibility to carry out disruptive medicine, to break change. And we have been working with genomic variation in plasma, in blood, in patients that we see that they are metastasizing, stage 3, stage 4. But we want to go a bit farther. We want to go to the root cause and to the solution, which is early detection. Now, with this idea in mind of early detection, and with the video that I will play to you, we apply to a program from Sanitas.
Uno de cada 2 hombres y una de cada 3 mujeres desarrollarán cáncer a lo largo de su vida. Hoy ya existen grandes avances en métodos de diagnóstico y nuevas terapias más efectivas, personalizadas y con menos efectos secundarios. Aunque, en la mayoría de los casos, el cáncer se detecta demasiado tarde. ¿Te imaginas que lo podemos detectar en un estadio tan precoz que no hay síntomas? Cuando todavía puede ser curable. 9 de cada 10 personas vencen al cáncer cuando se detecta temprano. Ganemos al cáncer y ayudemos a salvar vidas con el diagnóstico precoz. Porque la vida es un regalo.
Estamos un poquito más cerca de nuestro objetivo.
With this program,
una persona de 60 años,
we have a 60-year-old person.
Que es esfumadora,
sorry, there are problems with the sound.
que lleva
A former smoker who has been
por su neumólogo
monitored by pneumology
un nódulo pulmonar,
because
una mancha en el pulmón.
they had a stain in their lung.
Esa persona tenía una revisión de un TAC dentro de un año. Esa persona accedió a entrar en este programa conjunto que hemos desarrollado
That person agreed to come to this
de diagnóstico precoz.
early diagnosis program, and we found
En un análisis de sangre, 8 células tumorales. 8 células de un tumor.
and we found 8 cells, 8 tumor cells.
Y esto, que a priori puede
And
parecer
this,
una mala
which
noticia,
a priori it might seem like bad news, it's actually really,
es una buena noticia.
it's really good news.
Porque en estadios tempranos,
Because in early
cuando
stages,
todavía no hay metástasis,
when
cuando
there
esta
is no
enfermedad está
metastasis,
localizada,
when
las
the illness
posibilidades de curación
is
son
not
máximas.
located yet,
Y ese es nuestro objetivo.
that's when we can
También
be most
ahorrar
effective, and that's our objective.
Tenemos que dar la vuelta, ya lo hemos
We
visto
have
esta
to
mañana.
turn
Tenemos que dar la vuelta a
things
estos números.
around. We have to turn these figures
Solo el
around.
20% de
Only
los diagnósticos
20% of
son
diagnoses
en estadios tempranos.
are related to early stages.
Tenemos que cambiar. Tenemos
We
que
have to
cambiar
change
la
this.
mentalidad
We have to change our mindset,
y hacer un abordaje completo.
and we have
Antes de la enfermedad,
to tackle this in a
parte
complete
hereditaria.
way.
Establecer factores
We have to
preventivos
establish
durante la enfermedad
preventive factors during
Diagnóstico
the
precoz.
information, the
cuando ya hay
illness,
un
early
paciente
diagnosis, and when we have an
evaluación
oncologic
genómica,
patient, when we have a cancer
seguimiento de
patient,
ese
we have to
tumor,
do
porque ese tumor cambia,
follow-up of
se
this
presenta resistencia a
tumor,
tratamiento,
why is the tumor changing, why
y
is it resistant
después de
treatment,
la enfermedad,
and
buscar la
subsequently
carga
to
residual
the
mínima.
disease, we have
Ya
to
tenemos y
we have to
estamos viendo
find
cómo hay una
a
irrupción
way. We are
y poco a
seeing
poco
now already how
nada estará ya en el día a día
there is
de
something that we will be
la
using
parte de
in
consejo
every
genético de
day
herencia,
medicine
y la de paciente
and
diagnosticado. La evaluación
and the
genómica en
diagnosed
paciente
patient.
diagnosticado.
We will have the genomic
Nosotros nos vamos a
evaluation,
centrar,
genomic
nos centramos
assessment
porque
for
todavía no
diagnosed
hay
patients.
ningún
We
test o
still
método
don't have
de
any
diagnóstico temprano
diagnosis
genético en el
method
mercado que sea
for
eficiente. Están
for
empezando a
early
salir ahora
diagnosis,
mismo, como
genetic
los- como
diagnosis
los-
in the market yet
en esa fase inicial.
in this initial
¿Y cómo lo
stage.
hacemos?
Now,
Pues con una disrupción en la tecnología.
how do we do this?
Con una
With
innovación
a
en la
technological
tecnología.
disruption, with
Que
innovation,
hace unos años era impensable.
technological innovation that a few years ago
La
seemed
biopsia líquida,
unthinkable.
que es un método,
Now,
un análisis de sangre, ya lo hemos visto, es sencillo,
we have
se
this
puede
blood
seriar,
test that we have seen already.
es
This would be
económico.
really simple. This would be
y dentro de todos
really
los
cost efficient.
biomarcadores
And biomarkers
que hemos visto
that we
en
have
las
seen as
diapositivas
well
anteriores,
in the
nosotros nos estamos
in the
centrando en
previous
los ácidos
slides,
nucleicos en totales
we are focusing on
y en la célula
nucleic
tumoral circulante
acids
viva,
and
que es un marcador directo,
on markers
directo
that
del
are
tumor.
direct. They are direct markers
Y
of these
este es
tumors.
uno de nuestros objetivos.
This is one of
Que en
our
un análisis
objectives,
rutinario
that in a routine
podamos hacer
test
este
we
diagnóstico
can
precoz.
produce this early diagnosis.
La célula tumoral circulante se desprende del tumor
Tumorous
desde estadios muy
circulating
tempranos
cell,
de la
CTC,
carcinogénesis. Y ya tenemos datos
we
que
have
nos
information
indican que podemos
indicating
ver
that
esa célula hasta
we
4
can see
años
this
antes
cell up to
de
4
poder indicar la
years
imagen.
prior to this becoming an image.
¿Quién nos lo soporta? Pues
Now,
estudios
who is supporting
publicados
this?
recientemente
What
en el
is supporting this?
2019, como Sentinel,
Studies from
Oh,
2019,
publicaciones en
like
en
Sentinel,
Cancer Research,
publications
donde
in
vemos que
cancer
estos
research,
datos son cada vez
and
más
we
concluyentes.
see there that this data
Además,
and these
el
studies are
screening
more and more
con
conclusive.
célula tumoral circulante
We do screening
se
with
confirmó como un
CTC,
biomarcador
and that was
de
confirmed
alta
as a
sensibilidad
biomarker of
para
sensitivity
la detección precoz.
for
Y
early
también hemos
detection.
visto que esa célula, que ese clon,
Also,
va
we have seen
cambiando
that
con
this
el
cell,
tiempo.
this clone,
Y con
is
la célula
changing
podemos analizar esos
through
cambios con el
time,
tiempo.
and with this, we can analyze the changes through
Por
through
último,
time. Now,
de evidencias
lastly,
científicas, que hay muchas que podéis
we have scientific
encontrar.
evidence. You can
Esta-
find
este
them easily.
metaanálisis,
And this
donde lo dice,
meta-analysis,
con una cohorte de 1.600
where we are
estudios,
told
1.600 pacientes,
that a cohort of
que la célula tumoral circulante está
1,608
asociada
patients,
con un alto valor
this is associated
diagnóstico,
with a high,
en concreto en cáncer de
high
pulmón,
degree of
que es el
diagnostic
proyecto que
value
vamos a hacer. Y con estos
in lung
nombres,
cancer, for example.
nos fuimos,
And with this,
digamos,
we
al comité de ética
took
en un
this to
estudio
the committee of
compartido
ethics in a
con
shared
Sanitas, donde
research
quiero agradecer sobre
project with
a
Sanitas,
la doctora Gemma
which, by the
Villanueva,
way,
al
I wanted
doctor
to say
Callejas,
thank you to
a todos
Dr.
los
Villanueva, Dr.
investigadores
Callejas,
y también
and
a
all
todo
and
el
to all of
grupo
the
de
researchers
Sanitas,
and
liderados por
to
el
the
doctor
whole group
Domingo
of
Marzán.
Sanitas, led by the
Y este
Dr.
estudio
Domingo
lo hemos
Marzán.
realizado
Now, we carried
en
out
todos los
this
hospitales
project, this
y en el
research
centro
study
médico de mi-
in
Y nos hemos
different
centrado en pulmón.
hospitals, and we have focused
Pulmón porque
on
no tiene un screening y
a
pulmón
number
porque
of
es la
factors.
causa de muerte
in group 1
más prevalente
because
en
there's
hombres.
no screening for it.
Y hemos hecho
and
varios brazos
We have, and
Uno de
there are
los
several
brazos son
branches to
pacientes
this. One of
que
them
se clasifican
being
como alto
patients that are
riesgo
classified
por
as
las
high
guidelines
risk
de la NCCN, la clasificación
according
del 2019.
to the 2019
Más de
guidelines.
50 años, IPAs grandes,
They are older than
fumadores, otros
50
criterios
years
y con
old.
un nódulo.
They smoke over 20
Otro
cigarettes.
brazo
They
son los
stopped
moderados,
smoking
otro
less than
brazo son
15
los
years ago.
controles.
And the other
Ahora
group
hoy
are the
os voy a
moderate
presentar unos
risk
datos y
group.
unos
Now,
casos
I will
de
present
este
you
brazo
some
del grupo
cases
de alto riesgo.
related to this
con un nódulo.
branch of the high risk.
¿Cuál ha sido el diseño? Un diseño en dos fases,
The design is
en
two-phased.
donde desde un análisis de
and,
sangre
It
vamos a
starts with a
buscar
blood
la
test, and
concentración
from
de ácidos
there
nucleicos
we look
totales
for the concentration of
y
total
vamos a enumerar la
nucleic
célula tumoral circulante para hacer una
acids.
detección precoz. Y cuando pasa el corte que hemos
And
establecido,
when we
y
get
haremos
to
la
the
evaluación
threshold that we have
genómica,
established,
que ya
we
hemos
do a
visto,
genomic evaluation that we
de
have
ese
seen
material
already.
genético
We evaluate
para
genomically
ver
this
cuáles son las
this
mutaciones
material
asociadas a
to see, in
tumorogénesis
order to look for
para
the
ver
mutations, the
cuál es el
genetic
tratamiento
mutations,
adecuado.
and to decide what
Con
the
ese
best
panel,
treatment will be
que
for this.
incluye
Now, this
pues,
includes,
ahora mismo todos
for
los drivers que tenemos.
examples of the drivers that
oncología.
we have in
Tres
oncology.
casos solo os voy
Three
a presentar.
cases I will introduce to
muy
you
rápidos.
3 cases. I will present you 3 cases.
Varón, 69
Male,
años,
69
fumador,
years
con
old,
historia familiar de
former
cáncer de pulmón,
smoker with a lung cancer
y
family
que en
history.
2015
2015,
presenta
he
un nódulo pulmonar
presents
solitario.
an only
Empieza el circuito
lung
habitual
nodule
en
node.
neumología.
And
TAC,
we start the
seguimientos,
protocol, the
y
follow-ups,
nos vamos 3 años
and 3 years
al 2018.
down the line, we go to 2018
En el 2018,
when this
ese nódulo empieza a
node
crecer.
starts
Pero estaba
to
ahí,
grow.
latente.
It was there, latent,
Pero todavía pasa un año más.
but
2019.
another
Para tener
year
una
goes by.
confirmación por
Go
PET.
to 2019, March
Mayo.
2019, May
Desde clínica,
2019.
función guiada, PAZ,
we
con un resultado que no es
have a
concluyente
result
por
that
falta
is
de material,
non-conclusive
pero
because
además
of lack of
con
material.
un sangrado alveolar que
But
le
also
provoca a
there's,
este paciente estar ingresado un par de semanas.
There's
En ese
alveolar
momento,
bleeding,
hacemos
and
esta
at
prueba
that point
de biopsia líquida.
we carry out a
Vemos
liquid biopsy and we see
Células tumorales circulantes,
tumor cells that are
vemos
circulating.
que hay
We
concentración,
see the concentration.
analizamos ese material.
We
genético.
analyze this
En
genetic
junio,
material, and in June
tenemos la confirmación para anatomía
we get
patológica
confirmation for
de que esto es un carcinoma
anatomy
T1B.
pathology, and we
Aquí
get
es como lo
confirmation
vemos,
that this is
las células
carcinoma.
tumorales, cuál es el informe.
We see this here,
¿Cómo
tumor
vemos nosotros
cells,
en
we
el
see the
laboratorio
report,
esa
and
célula
how
tumoral?
do we
Célula
see
tumoral
this in the
es
lab?
esta primera.
The tumor cell
Abajo son
in the
linfos,
lab is this first one.
leucocitos.
This is how we see
¿Cuál es
it.
la diferencia? La
So what is the
diferencia
difference?
entre
The
ellos
difference between
es que estas
them
células
is that
tumorales,
these
después
tumor
de un proceso
cells,
microfluídico,
tumor
de
cells,
ponerlas en orden, en una fila con
after
todas las células,
we get them in a
y marcar las
sequence,
muestras
in a row
con unos
with all the
imanes,
other cells, and mark the
secuestrarlas,
samples with
y luego
magnets,
tenerlas con unos receptores de membrana,
and then
FPR, EPCAM, citoqueratina, que es un
we
pool, y
use
CD45
other
negativo, las
methods
podemos ver, enumerar y contar.
that mean that we can count them. We
Y
can
además,
count them out, and
Como hemos pasado esa primera fase, vamos a
we have
hacer
already
el
gone
análisis
through this
de ese
first
material genético.
phase, and then we
¿Y
can
qué nos
analyze
encontramos?
this genetic
Os
material.
vais a olvidar de los
We
PSA,
find here,
no, en breve
we will
vais a
forget,
hablar de genes.
we will not be
breve,
talking about
TP53
PSA
va a ser uno de los
levels
genes
anymore. We will be talking
claves
about genes
de
now.
los que todos vais a hablar.
And
Este en concreto, y además esta posición, la
TP53 will be one of the key genes
R275H,
that we will be talking about.
se encuentra
So now,
en 3 de cada 100.
this type of gene
adenocarcinoma.
is found in
Entonces,
in
una
3
posición muy
of every
frecuentemente
100
encontrada, que nos
carcinomes.
confirma
And this
esta parte del
confirms
diagnóstico.
this part of the diagnosis.
Es decir,
So,
este abordaje, integrando la célula tumoral circulante y el análisis de los
this
ácidos
this
nucleicos
management of this situation
es útil
is
cuando otras
useful
pruebas
when
actuales
other
no son
tests
conclusivas.
are non-conclusive.
Y además
And
nos
also
permite
it allows
detectar,
us to detect
¿vale?, estos datos asociados a tumorogénesis
this
en
data
etapas
associated to the
tempranas.
genesis of a tumor
No hay que esperar
in
4 años.
when they are in the state of
Podríamos hacerlo sin
membranes.
análisis
So we
rutinarios
don't have to wait for
o
4 years to a
cuando menos
routine
con los primeros
analysis.
síntomas.
Or at least we get them at the first symptoms.
Otro caso,
Now, let's see another case.
varón de 64 años,
64-year-old
enfermedad
male,
crónica,
obstruction,
fumador desde el 73,
obstructive
que no tenía historia
disease,
familiar.
no family
Y
history.
Volvemos a nuestro nódulo.
Again, we go back to our nodule.
2017,
2017,
un año más, 2018.
2018, a year later,
Otras pruebas complementarias
we get a positive
negativas.
result, and other
Se hizo
other
también,
tests
en
get
este caso,
negative results.
Otra biopsia líquida, pero sin células
Liquid
tumorales.
biopsy, but without tumor
No
cells,
tenemos diagnóstico
so we
todavía.
don't have a diagnosis yet.
2019,
In 2019,
paciente sin diagnóstico.
the patient
Intervenimos.
remains
¿Qué
undiagnosed,
creéis que hemos
but we
encontrado?
intervene. What do you think we
Pues
found?
nuestras células
Well,
tumorales,
of course, our tumor cells,
nuestra concentración de ácidos nucleicos libres circulantes,
our concentration
la
of
evaluación de esa
circulating
concentración,
nucleic
nos
acids,
volvemos a encontrar
nucleic acids,
TP53
and we find again
Con, en este caso,
TP53
con su apellido diferente que es
Again,
la
this time,
G245.
the surname for this would be
Pero no solo eso, sino que nos
G255.
encontramos
But
también en
also,
SMART4
we also find
otra
in
variante
SMART4 another variant
que
of this,
está
which is
asociada
associated
a respuesta a inhibidores de
to a
topoisomerasa,
response of
irinotacán.
inhibitors of
Aquí
another type.
Se me ha pasado comentaros
And
un dato
I'm sorry, but I
importante,
didn't mention this before,
que
and it's
es,
important,
pues,
which
que
is
este
that
paciente,
this patient
no se podía, por alto riesgo,
with
no
high
se
risk
podía
couldn't
hacer la operación, la
we
cirugía, por la
couldn't
localización.
undergo surgery due to the
Con lo que,
location of the lesion.
Como
The lesion.
conclusión,
So therefore,
diré
as a
que en
conclusion,
pacientes
I will tell you that patients
en los que no es recomendable hacer cirugía
where
por
it's not
el alto
advisable to
riesgo,
do
la
surgery, to
biopsia
carry out
líquida
surgery because of high
nos
risk,
aporta
liquid biopsy
conclusiones
gives us conclusions,
y además nos
and
aporta un
also
tratamiento asociado
it
de
gives
terapia
us
biológica
the chance
a
to
una
carry out an
variante.
associated treatment of a different variant.
El último caso
So
es una
lastly,
mujer de
we have
73,
a 73-year-old
de 73
female
años, adenopatía,
with an adenopathy
que, como bien sabemos,
who
pues llegó a consulta por una fractura.
came to
La
us
mayoría
with
de las
a
detecciones primarias
fracture.
de los tumores son por causas incidentales, o
Most
van a
tumors,
cardiología o van a
most
traumatología.
detections are incidentally detected. They go
Y
to
vemos
cardiology
esta
or to
mancha
go somewhere
en
else. But
pulmón.
then we saw this,
Estamos hablando de
this
mayo.
stain in
En
her
junio,
lung. We're talking
ácido
about May.
negativo,
In
bronco
June,
negativa, pruebas complementarias negativas,
all tests are negative.
biopsia líquida,
Liquid biopsy,
encontramos
we
nuestras
find
células tumorales,
our tumor
encontramos
cells, we
nuestras
find
variantes.
our
En
variants.
agosto
In
se
August,
confirma el
this is
resultado por
confirmed
anatomía patológica.
with
Y ahora
pathology,
está en seguimiento
anatomical
en
pathology.
oncología.
And now
¿Y
she
aquí qué
is
más
undergoing
aporta,
treatment in
aparte
oncology.
del diagnóstico precoz?
Now, what are the
¿Qué más
advantages of this
aporta? Tenemos una
early
variante en
diagnosis?
IDH2
We have a variant
y
of
múltiples ensayos clínicos a donde
IDH2
podemos derivar a este paciente.
and many other ways of treating this
conclusión,
patient. Therefore, as a means of
añadimos
conclusion,
no solo
I
tratamiento,
would
sino
say
la
that
parte de ensayos
we
clínicos
added
asociados
treatment, but also
y la biopsia líquida pues,
liquid
es eficaz
biopsy
y
was
complementaria cuando hay otras
useful
pruebas que no
and
son
was
conclusivas.
complementary when there were other tests that were
Evidentemente,
non-conclusive.
si hubiéramos hecho una
Therefore,
analítica
if we had carried
rutinaria,
out a normal, a
nos
routine
hubiéramos
test,
encontrado
we would have
también nuestros
found
indicadores.
also our markers.
Los resultados preliminares
Preliminary
de este estudio,
results
solo
of
de este
this
brazo de
study,
pacientes de alto riesgo,
of this
nos dicen que
branch
tenemos
of high-risk
un
patients
50%
says that there's
donde
50%
de
of
esta
them,
población, 51%,
of this
que ha
population
pasado nuestro corte de
that
célula tumoral circulante de
have
concentración,
have gone
que le
over
hemos
the
pasado a fase
threshold
2 y un
and they
68%
have
encontramos una
moved to
variante
phase
asociada a
2,
tumorgénesis
and
por
in
tratamiento,
68% we have found
un
a
30%
variant,
no tiene
and
variantes.
30% doesn't have
Esto
a
está
different
descrito.
variant of
Un
this.
30% de los tumores
30%
no
of
tiene una
tumors
mutación driver,
doesn't have a mutation,
no tiene una variante, con lo que es
and there's no
hay que hacer
variant.
esta parte
Therefore,
de complementariedad con células
we are carrying out
y tenemos un
complementary
100% de
studies,
concordancia,
and there's a 100%
un 100%
match
de concordancia de los datos moleculares
of the molecular data
con la
with
clasificación de anatomía patológica.
the classification provided by
Por ahora
pathology.
hemos confirmado un
Pathologists.
32% con
We
anatomía
have checked
patológica y estamos esperando
32%, and
a que
we
en el circuito
are
nos vayan
now
confirmando el resto de los
waiting
pacientes que
for the
nosotros
rest of the
tenemos.
colleagues to
Ten en
confirm
cuenta que son
our tests.
un grupo de alto riesgo
These
clasificado
are a
por las
high
guías clínicas
risk.
como alto
This is
riesgo,
a high
con
risk
lo que
group,
estos datos
and
son bastante realistas.
and these data therefore are very realistic.
Como conclusión general,
Now, as a general conclusion,
la combinación
I will
de
say
ácido
that the
nucleico
combination
circulantes
of
con células
nucleic
tumoral
acid
circulante
with
es una técnica
CTC
no invasiva
is a non-invasive
eficaz
technique.
para-
It's
ha sido
useful,
realmente
sufficient,
eficaz,
and it has been
funciona para la
very
identificación de
successful
variables asociadas a
for
tumorgénesis.
identifying variants associated
Ideal
to the genesis of
Sería
tumors.
realizar
The idea would be to
en un plazo de tiempo
to
determinado,
carry
que no van
out
a ser 10 años,
within time, obviously
un
not in
análisis
10 years'
rutinario de
time,
sangre
hopefully, an analysis, an assessment to detect whether there is a presence of a CTC. Now, I insist that our data come from a high-risk branch, and therefore that's why we have such a high rate of population with this type of CTC. But obviously, if we widen the population, then the data will change. Now, this is a disruptive change in how we tackle the oncological patient. Now, what we have here is we have got to change by means of incorporating at early stages, at least when we have the early symptoms, this tool for counting tumor cells and to take the patient out of the circuit. Now we have to wait for CAT scans, we have to wait for PETs, we have to wait for many types of results, and it would be, the idea would be to not have to wait for all of this.
Como conclusión,
so, to sum up,
hablamos de marcadores directos,
we're talking about direct biomarkers,
un análisis de sangre,
like for example a blood test.
No solo el diagnóstico, sino el tratamiento y el seguimiento.
It's not just about diagnosis, but also treatment
no
and follow-up.
Solo para un tipo tumoral como es pulmón,
we're not only talking about lung cancer, but many other type of tumors, colon, breast, etc. We have started by lung tumors. And
primera causa de mortalidad en hombres.
Well, it's the first cause of mortality for men. And we will carry on, we will continue with all other types of tumors. Thank you very much. This is a photograph for Sanitas of our process and our integration. Thank you very much. Rafael, you will have to talk about those who go with us along the way, our silent partners who make us who we are. Thank you very much, Sanitas, for allowing me to be here. I'm sure I will leave people out of these acknowledgements, but thank you very much to Domingo. Thank you very much to all of you, because you are responsible for me being here. And I am extremely proud of making this presentation, although initially I was a pharmacologist. I am not a doctor. I am a pharmacologist, but I started with this and I ended up doing microbiology in the Ramón y Cajal Hospital in Madrid. Now, I wanted to tell you about 3 things before I start my presentation. The title. So we talk about disruption, and it is important to look at the value of words. I looked at my phone and looked up on the Spanish Academy Dictionary at disruption and looked at the definition for disruption. And there's only one entry for this, and it says it's a breakage or sudden interruption of something. I don't know if what you think about this, about the word, the idea of this being sudden. Well, I think step by step we are increasing our knowledge of microbiota or microbiome, and we will see now, look at these terms and how they relate to each other, but maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, we will 5 or 10 years down the line, we will look at these techniques in a different way. In this slide, there are some conflicts of interest that I will have to mention. we have an assistential group in the Ramón y Cajal Hospital, and we also have a research group. And mainly, I just wanted to acknowledge the name of these two people, Rosa del Campo and Juan de Dios Caballero, and on our work on intestinal microbiome. The second idea I wanted to tell you about would be that personalized medicine and precision medicine, we can look at a paper from the Roche Institute, where it defines it as the application and the design of strategies for diagnosis and treatment dedicated to the substrate, genetic substrate, and of each patient. Now, this gives us a few pointers on what personalized medicine is, but what really has made a difference in terms of advancing with this concept is the introduction of genetics. Technological innovation that Rafael has explained to us. So platforms we are using similar platforms, and also the interest or the opportunity we move because it is necessary to go forward, but also because we are asked to do so. And this is a field where we will have to invest. Now, this is a study carried out in 2015, and it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. We talk about patients, subjects, and we have a diagnostic or bio IT platforms, and then we have personalized treatment. In terms of microbiome and microbiota, we are still caught between the diagnostic platform, and we are starting to provide personalized treatments. But in the field of microbiology, we have always done this. Now we have patients, we have diagnoses, and our treatments are tailored to each patient. The objective of my talk will be to talk about microbiota or microbiome. There are a few definitions here where we can see what it is for. I just wanted to give you a few ideas on what it is. Microbiota is flora, is your bacteria living in an ecological environment, an ecological niche, a specific one. Microbiome is the whole of the microorganisms, their genes, and the environmental conditions of these communities. And the metagenome is the genetic information for the whole microbiome. The addition of all the microorganisms. OTU is the operational taxonomic unit, and we talk about this in terms of the techniques we use for sequencing genres or different percentages. So the first person who started to mention this concept was Joshua Lederberg, who was a Nobel Prize in 1948. He was very young. He worked at the University of Wisconsin. He wasn't given the Nobel Prize for talking about microbiome, but he was the first to understand the language of bacteria through DNA. He was the first person to talk about these issues. Now, after this, he started to talk about microbes and describe them as microorganisms, pathogenic, commensal, symbiotic, and pathogenic community of microorganisms sharing an ecological niche in the human body. Now, we don't talk about these microorganisms anymore. Now we talk about different communities, different groups. For example, we read the communications. We talk about actinobacteria, firmicutes, proteobacteria, for fusobacteria or proteobacteria, etc. But in this language, we have to be a little bit disruptive and start to try to understand, because this can change the future clinical reports or lab reports that we will produce. Now, for advancing knowledge of microbiome or microbiota, we have also used different techniques. What we used to do conventionally was microbiologic cultures, culture plaques, and this was closer to microbiota, but we are now moving towards microbiome using sequencing platforms. This type of sequencing by Sanger is used sometimes when we want to check the results from other platforms. Second generation sequencing, this is a little bit more complex, thinking about libraries, multiplex amplification, and bigger chunks. Now we're talking about third generation sequencing. This is a one-only molecule sequencing. There's no pre-amplification phase. It has a wider coverage, and the average number of reading of each sequence is that is rebuilt. This system offers to us the sequencing because it comes to us through some pores, and we have a number of associated programs that give us the content of what we have included in this case. Now, this is the dream because it allows us to carry out a more important analysis with a higher degree of data, a higher rate of data. Now, we are working with different concepts like culturomics, which is to do cultures of microorganisms in order to try to identify what we are doing by genetic sequencing. We are trying to do that, but with microorganisms. We like to do that because we think that we can learn a lot from there. For example, the interrelationship between them.
Se ha considerado el microbioma como un órgano más.
The microbiome has been identified as an additional organism. We can find microbiome in different locations in the body. Look at this picture that comes from a report by the Roche Institute with a group of researchers that were trying to understand the challenges in the study of microbiome. We can find microorganisms in the skin, in the respiratory tract, in the vagina, and you may find some locations that before the use of smartphones you may think, no, there are no microorganisms in the placenta. Well, there are, and there is a specific microbiota associated to placenta. This is an article that shocked me due to the title. It is true that nowadays we need to sell the article with the title. Before we were just looking at the abstract. Now we're just looking at the title, and if it interests us, then we read the whole article. This article said that the placenta had a unique microbiome, which obviously is very important in the development of the immune system of this person. There are also other papers which are quite curious. This one was from last year in a conference in the United States. And this paper said that there are bacteria in our brains. So maybe our brain is not as sanctuary as we thought it was. But I'm not sure. I don't know, because it hasn't been published yet. And it is important to publish this kind of paper in magazines that carry out peer reviews. So we will have to wait to see if this is important or not, also in relation with the importance of microbiome. The important thing is that we are born in a natural birth or in other types of birth. In natural birth, a microbiota comes with us, but also there are people who are born by C-section delivery. In this case, there are some microorganisms that move through the vagina, and the microbiota of the newborn can be acquired, and it can play an important role in her or his development. So we need to identify the different microorganisms. We have also found these kind of papers in the regular media where they say that C-section delivery babies have a higher risk of infection by bacteria. It is true that our microbiome changes through the years. So as years go by, some of the bacterial groups vanish, other proteobacteria appear, firmicutes can appear, and it can play a role in aging and immunosenescence. And there are some studies on microbiome which are focused on these concepts. Of course, there are some factors that have an influence on the composition of the microbiome. Regarding the gut microbiome, diet can play an important role, but also the social interaction and the interaction with the environment, because we share and we exchange our microbiota and our microbiome with other people. From a technical point of view, thanks to the contribution of big data and machine learning, we will probably be able to define in a near future what a normal or a healthy microbiome is, a eubiosis, or a sick microbiome, dysbiosis. So this imbalance will help us differentiate the normal and sick microbiome in order to know what factors will have an influence on a certain pathology on individuals. One of the first projects to understand the healthy microbiome as compared to a sick microbiome started in 2008. There were, you may think that 300 patients were not enough, but 10 years ago, sequencing was much more expensive than nowadays. But they were already talking about precision medicine, and they were trying to use 3 single models for inflammatory bowel disease to know the difference between those people born through natural birth or C-section delivery and those who had type 2 diabetes. The aim of the project was not only to define the microbiota and microbiome of these people, but also to try to find biomarkers that could be helpful to carry out later in precision medicine. This is the human microbiome and human microbiome integrative projects, which gave a definition of microorganisms as well as to talk about the proteomics or metabolomics. We wanted to know what the microorganisms were and the signals, the metabolites between them, and the consequences of those metabolites. Some examples of other similar projects are the following. This is an initiative by the White House in the United States. These are from dentist associations in the US, and these are from stomach experts. And this project is carried out by NASA, and tries to prove that astronauts that spend many years on an airship, how this environment can affect their microbiome. There are also some European projects which represent an opportunity. We have the age 30 in a near future, and there are some research lines that are related to microbiome, which will be an opportunity for those interested in this field. Probably the field that has been more studied is the gut microbiome, in order to try to know how these modifications can alter the health of a person. It can be through a local alteration such as IBM, diabetes, obesity, but it can also be CPOD, gingivitis, and then it can also have remote alterations. So there is an imbalance of the immune system that can affect other organs, such as the CNS, the central nervous system. And here the interconnection between microbiomes and their location comes into play. This interconnection is probably related to the metabolites that appear during these processes. Probably the axis gut-brain is the most important one, because what happens in our stomach, in our gut, can affect what happens in our central nervous system. There can be some hormones or neurotransmitters, and some authors are talking now about psychobiotics. We are talking recently we are talking about probiotics in order to reestablish the balance of microorganisms, but this goes further beyond. This is to try to establish a balance of the situation in the central nervous system. Some of the papers that refer to this interconnection between gut and brain are related to Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, also papers related to the autism spectrum, because in the autism spectrum is where we can find more papers related to microbiome, and also papers related to schizophrenia. So maybe we need to keep a look on these fields in the future. From my point of view, I think that we have made progress on diabetes and obesity in this regard. And also maybe the fecal microbiota transplantation. Maybe we can regulate the weight of a person by transplanting the microbiome that lives in our gut. This has already been done with mice, and some thin mouse were given feces from obese mice, and they became obese, and the other way around. And so maybe we can alter the shape of our body. This may seem, hey, what can I do? I might need to eat feces? Well, let's find the way of doing things without having to eat feces, or as a colleague of mine says, to eat shit. So as for cancer, of course, it has already been mentioned. There are many groups working on this, not only on how the microbiome is in the gut and its consequences in a pancreas cancer or another type of cancers. This is a paper that shows the different microorganisms and the differences between them. In the proof of concept, we can establish some correlations. However, it has been made by a Clostridium difficile, This is an intervention carried out on patients with Clostridium difficile, with diarrhea, so they can be given antibiotics to try to tackle this. The patient doesn't respond, and one of the best or better, the more successful interventions is to carry out a fecal microbiota transplantation with a higher degree of success. If you check all the clinical trials, in the new, you can see that there are over 300 trials that assess the FMT in the environment of gastrointestinal disorders. So there are people that are analyzing if this transplantation can have consequences on oncological patients. We are also carrying out this transplantation in repetitive urinary infections. We have carried out this in our hospitals, and some of our patients told us, I do no longer have the diarrhea, and my persistent urinary infection has also been cleared. So we are carrying out this fecal microbiome transplantation for repetitive urinary infected people. We can find many other applications of this fecal microbiome transference. For example, this patient, which had a fecal microbiota transplant, started to grow hair again after having lost it. So this microbiota is having some consequences on the immune system of the patient. In some patients that were given an FMT, those resistant bacteria that they had vanished. So when you compare all these data, you can see that these people with multi-resistant bacteria communities have a higher risk of getting infected when admitted in hospitals. However, in the literature evidence, we find an almost from 40 to 90% of eradication rate. But not everything is perfect. If you read medical press regarding FMT, you can see this alert from FDA. They cancelled the trials carried out in their country last year to see what happened with some patients that died after having been implanted fecal microbiota. This has been published in the New England magazine recently, because those researchers didn't analyze the donors of those microbiota. They tried to, so they did the opposite of what we did. This patient had multi-resistant microorganisms whose therapeutic alternatives were very low, and they, in the end, they passed away. So, of course, it has its pros and cons, so we need to keep on doing research on it, and we cannot just say that FMT will solve all the problems. One example of something that we have carried out is that we can open some line of research. Our hospital is expert in cystic fibrosis, and that is why we focused on the microbiome at the respiratory level. We had 15 patients with cystic fibrosis, lung microbiota, and we tried to define the profile. The firmicutes were at a lower level as the disease evolved. So when we were trying to identify the pathogen microorganisms, we used to find staphylococcus and so on. But when discussing about the experts in computing tools, we were wondering about the noise. And there were two species called Dellovibrio and Vampirovibrio. And these microorganisms are predators of other microorganisms. So it is similar as the mechanism that eradicates bacteria. Obviously, this is a new line of therapeutical research, of developing microorganisms to establish a balance of microorganisms to avoid the colonization of harmful microorganisms at the respiratory level. Of course, we can perform interventions. The most important one would be the FMT. For some patients, this should be made through the fecal microbiome transplantation, but we just give the patient some pills that might seem similar to antibiotics, and the patient evolves. This can be done via pills, but aiming at identifying microorganisms that can be key for the progression of the patient. We have found biomarkers such as dentisani, Streptococcus dentisani, that can show a good oral hygiene, and other biomarkers that may be helpful, for example, for the high blood pressure patients. What are our challenges? Well, we need to do things faster. We also need to standardize data. We need to apply this to the clinical practice, and we need to identify biomarkers in order to make the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy microbiome. We have many recommendations and challenges, and there are some targeted studies that want to determine the metabolic function of the microbiome. We need to create subject networks. We need to standardize the analysis of the microbiome. We need to have technology platforms of reference. We need to consolidate specialized teams, including bioinformatics experts who can understand not only computing but also health challenges. And obviously we need to highlight the importance of maintaining a healthy microbiota, because therefore we can understand what leads us to have an unhealthy microbiota. Thank you very much. Está un poco alto, ¿no? No, si aún no, espera. Thank you very much, Rafael. The lunch break and cocktail is not cancelled. Do not worry about that, because I have seen some strange faces. We are 3 minutes ahead of time, so if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm just going to ask a question that everyone should be able to answer. And we're not talking about a period of 10 years. I think it's less time. And if people have invested $1 billion in California in this project, I don't think they're stupid, right? Maybe it's not a dream. Maybe it can be a reality to develop a blood test in 2 or 5 years' time that can diagnose early a tumor. Maybe this simple test can show that there is a cancer, to diagnose cancer in an early way. And if it can, then maybe we will study DNA from bacteria in the future. In my department, we are discussing on how to incorporate outside of clinical trials the microbiome in cancer patients. And this is a problem of mindset, of culture, and it is also an ethical problem because in the labs we are finding things that can be applied in a very fast way. The data on minimal residual disease and on screening and early diagnosis are so good that we are going to change the legal regulations on clinical trials in order to apply it early, because otherwise it will be too late. I think that from 1 to 5 years, we will have these tests available for most of solid tumors, not for all of them. Very briefly, please. I agree that in 2 years, the early diagnosis, which will be incorporated, it is already a reality in the labs. And I think it will move to the clinical practice very fast because there is a lot of pressure. And there is a problem to solve, and we have the data to solve those problems. Obviously, integration will be gradual, because it has to be done step by step. We will have more gradual approximations, such as the ones presented in this conference. Some of them do have an indirect and fast way of application. Maybe we're talking about a point of care for the patient in order to study the microbiome, but I think in this case there is a long way to go. However, there are already companies which can be operated, which operate on the internet. So we need to be careful because we do not know what the certification is. But the important thing here is to identify biomarkers that can make us think that the microbiome has some alterations and need some interventions. I think this is our challenge for the future. Okay, thank you very much to all of you. Let's move on to the next roundtable. Thank you very much. Well, this is the time to introduce the closing conference. Remember, we have the hashtag Foro Sanitas 2019. Keep using it. I am going to introduce you to a very special person for me. He's a friend of mine, and he is somebody that had influence on my life because he can find a positive side of things. We have a positive resonance. He doesn't interest me due to his microbiota, but for his brain capacity. My positive resonance can be seen here, and is linked to humor, to comedy, and ethics. You can be very successful. So Domingo Marzal Martin is going to speak about digital hospital. The future is here. You will see he's very special because he has many skills: science, love, comedy, and ethics. That's Domingo Marzal. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Iñaki. Before getting started, well, I'd like to say that I don't know why, but I'm always the last one, and I am between you and the cocktail. So, because the previous doctor told us so much about feces, well, maybe this half an hour will be necessary in order to refresh ourselves. Medicine as an institution and doctors are well regarded in our society, but we would be mistaken if we were too self-complacent and didn't self-evaluate, and if we didn't wonder how to get better. Look at this. 15,000 people were asked not long ago, and they told us that 71% said, well, I value enormously what doctors do, but perhaps the actual visit is not very pleasant. And between 1 out of every 3 and 1 out of 5 said that, well, I have problems to make an appointment. 27% said that it's a waste of time because you have to go to your GP before getting to your specialist, or perhaps you go to the specialist that you didn't have to go, and many other points. But lastly, some people don't have a specialist in their area. They don't have the specialist they need in their area, and this should give us information on what if I was able to have some sort of remote office where I could do remote consultation. People could make the appointment whenever it was more convenient for them, and this virtual assistant was, for example, able to advise me on what the right specialist was for me. So what if I have a service that helps me on the cloud? Am I able to transcend geography, and therefore can I see people in other places? So if I don't have a specialist in my area, can I see a specialist who is based elsewhere? We are well regarded, but we have to listen to our patients if we want to change a few things. Sometimes certain things. What's so funny? Oh, sorry. It's this signage saying health center and cemetery are in the same direction. Well, obviously, without joking, we can't do everything right. But sometimes we do things right, but they are not understood. So, for example, this signage in Galicia, you tell people that the health center, the surgery is in the same direction as the cemetery, they get suspicious. Now, this image for me proves two things. One, that nowadays technology can help us solve a couple of problems,
siempre,
namely
siempre la relación entre
that
un médico y un paciente a día de hoy tiene que
the relationship between patient
coincidiendo
and
ambos en el
doctor
espacio y en
today
el tiempo.
has to coincide in space
Y a
and
lo
time.
mejor no es necesario
But
que
perhaps
siempre coincidamos con nuestro
it's
paciente
not
en el
always
espacio
necessary
y en
that
el
we
tiempo.
coincide in space
Segundo
and
problema
time.
que esta imagen
Now,
muestra para mí,
secondly, this
y
image
es,
also proves to me
que al fin y al cabo
that
es una persona
really
la que es atendida por otra persona.
it's just about one
Y esa
person
persona, que en este
being
caso es que
examined
es el médico,
by another person, the doctor.
tiene un nivel de
Now,
conocimiento
the
que
doctor
depende de
has
cuánto
a
ha
level of
estudiado,
knowledge
de
that
cuántos
depends on
casos
how
ha
much
visto,
they have studied,
incluso como
how
ser
many
humano que es,
cases they
depende de cómo
have
se encuentre ese día,
seen,
¿no? ¿Ha dormido
and
bien? ¿Está saliendo
how
de
they are
guardia?
feeling
¿Tiene
every
problemas
day,
personales? Por
have
tanto,
they
el hecho de que
been
una
working
persona
overnight, have
con eso
they
que
slept
comentaba
well.
atienda a otra persona
So
hace que la consulta en muchas
this
ocasiones tenga un
person
componente de
examining
azar
another person
demasiado alto.
means that there is a luck
Mira, hace
factor
unas semanas
of,
estuve en
which
el
is quite high,
museo
this
el museo
unpredictability.
de París.
Now,
Sabéis
I
que
was
es
at the
uno de
Musée
los-
d'Orsay in
uno de los
Paris
museos,
not long ago, and
que tiene una colección
it
de
has
arte impresionista pues,
a collection of
espectacular.
impressionist
Pues cuando uno
art
entra en el
paintings,
museo, pues espera ir a ver pues,
which
a
is
Renoir,
extraordinary,
a
and you see
Manet,
Renoir,
hay una
you see
colección de
Manet, Van
y
Gogh,
ese es el recorrido que
and
hacemos
that
todos, y
is
quería al final de la
the
visita
journey
ir
that we
a
all
ver la
do
zona
within the
donde está,
museum.
Toulouse-Lautrec.
And at the end, I wanted to
Cuando
go
iba a
to the
llegar al sitio de
Toulouse-Lautrec section.
Toulouse-Lautrec,
Now,
me
when we
encontré
got there,
con este cuadro.
I saw this painting.
Claro, yo cuando vi el cuadro,
When I
me
saw
quedé
the
mirándolo.
painting,
De
I
hecho,
looked at it,
dediqué a ver
and-
ese cuadro más tiempo que al resto, todos los cuadros
and
juntos.
as a matter
Yo
of
estaba ahí
fact,
parado
I
delante del
looked at
cuadro
it for
para
longer
verme
than
parado,
I
porque nadie
had
se paró a mi
looked
lado,
at any of the
pero
other
me miraban,
paintings.
me miraban, yo tenía cara como de
People were
intelectual
looking at
viendo
me
el
like,
cuadro.
and I looked
Eh,
really intellectual when I
Algunos miraban,
stared
¿qué
at
está
this
mirando, qué está
painting.
mirando este?
And people,
Yo he
I'm
de
sure they were
confesar que no soy
thinking,
un
what is he
experto en
staring
arte.
at?
Lo que hice fue consultar
But what I
esa
did, I'm no
fotografía
art
de,
expert,
está al lado,
so
es
what I did is
la autora del cuadro.
I
Quise
looked
consultar a ver si el cuadro lo había pintado
at
una
the
imagen de una
little
mujer.
sign
lo ha hecho-
next to the painting,
claro, lo ha
just
hecho
to
un mono y
see if
tiene,
the
tiene
painting
un
had been
cuadro,
done
que yo no
by
pillo, ¿no?
a
Entonces,
monkey,
claro,
for
mi
example.
conclusión,
Now, there's a point here in
eh,
this painting that I'm not getting.
para mí este cuadro es una mierda.
For me, this is shit, basically.
Consulté que no, que es una pintora que basa
Then
su obra
I
en
looked
sus
into it, and
experiencias
no, it's a painter, it's a
pues
female
mirad
artist. She's a
esto-
female artist who
esto
bases
que,
her art
no
on
sé si
her
puedo
personal
decir
experience.
mierda, pero ya después de
No, well,
de
I
la
wasn't
revisión,
sure about using the word
podríamos,
shit, but
claro,
well, we've had a
nosotros
presentation
tenemos un
about
museo
it, so I
superchulo que
think
se
it's
llama
okay.
Hospital.
Now, we have a great
Y
museum, which
muchas
is
veces
called
llamamos a la
Hospital,
gente a que entre en nuestro museo, en
and
nuestro
we
hospital,
take people to our museum,
y
our
uno espera
hospital.
ver un Renoir, un
And when you
Monet,
do
un
that,
Van Gogh,
you
y con
expect to
mucha
see a
frecuencia,
Renoir, a
hace lo mismo que
Monet,
yo,
and
dice,
very
"He
often
venido aquí a ver
you
este
go,
cuadro",
well, I'm here to see,
y
to
tienen la
look at this
sensación de que
painting,
están
and
viendo
you
algo
have
parecido a
the
esto. Es decir,
feeling that you
hay
are looking at
muchísimas
something
consultas,
similar to
muchísimos
this.
actos que ocurren físicamente en el hospital,
Many actions that
donde,
happen
no se le
within
aporta
a
valor al
hospital
paciente, y la sensación que tienen es
mean
un
that
poco una
the
decepción.
patient is
Yo voy a
not
ver una gran
is
obra
not
de arte
valued.
y me encuentro con un
They
círculo.
go there thinking they are going to find a
El
work of
sistema
art,
de
and they
salud,
find
el
something that
concepto
is not
hospital está
quite a
cambiando
work of art.
y hay cuatro
Now, the
fuerzas,
idea of
muy
healthcare
importantes que
is
van a cambiar el
changing,
status
and
quo.
there are
Una de ellas
four
es
main
la
driving
sostenibilidad.
forces, one of them being sustainability.
Bueno, todos sabéis cuál es el problema.
You
Podemos
all know
explicar
what
el
the
gasto
problem
en salud.
is. We
Parece poco
can
probable, ¿no?
talk about
Otro
expenditure
driver
in
importante para el
healthcare,
cambio
and there is another
nuestro
issue,
concepto
which
de
is
hospital, tiene que ver con la tecnología.
to
Una
do
tecnología
with
que a día
technology.
de hoy es posible. Cuando hace unos
Technology
años se habló,
that is possible today,
del
but
concepto de hospital líquido,
when a
hoy
few years
se
ago
habla
we
de
were talking
él,
about the
era
concept of
un
liquid
buen concepto,
hospitals,
pero la tecnología
it
no
was
permitía-
a
no
wonderful
permitía
concept,
hacerlo.
but
Para
technology
trascender
didn't
de
allow
las
for
paredes
it
del
yet.
hospital para llegar a los pacientes.
I mean, it was
Para nosotros la
you had to
tecnología
move between the
es una
walls of a
herramienta,
hospital
nunca
to
un
reach
objetivo. Es una herramienta
patients.
para mejorar
Now,
lo que
this is a
hacemos
tool
con
to
los
improve what
pacientes.
we do with
El tercer
patients.
driver
The
tiene
third
que ver
driver
con el despertar de
is
alguna
to
forma
do
del
with
consumidor.
the
Somos
awakening
consumidores
of
de una forma
consumers.
determinada,
Now,
y eso mismo
consumers
lo podemos trasladar a la salud.
behave in a
Eh,
particular
y
way
el
and
cuarto
expect
driver y muy
things,
importante
and we
es el
can
cambio
want
social que
to
se ha producido.
transport
Somos
that
una
to
sociedad
healthcare.
incremental,
Our society is
extremos, en la
incremental,
que o es bueno o
and
malo,
it's a
blanco,
society of
negro o
extremes.
seguro,
We have
y
good,
eso hemos de
evil,
entenderlo a la
black,
hora de
white,
evolucionar
and
nuestro
we have to
concepto
understand
hospital.
this if
Mirad,
we want to
como
manage
os decía,
hospitals. As I was saying to you,
el consumidor
consumers
pretende que la vivencia que tiene
want their everyday experiences as people to be transported, to be replicated when they go to hospital. It's a matter of logistics. It's a matter of organizing our processes. So, for example, Amazon are an example of, and they do a couple of things that could be inspiring for us. A couple of things. Okay, so can anyone think about them? First, they connect people. They connect people all the time. They connect people who sell to people who buy. If we connect the person who consults to the person who is seeking to consultation, now we apply data and we can apply artificial intelligence. We have to get what we need even before we know that we need it. And this sounds like we could know what is going to happen to a patient applying artificial intelligence. Well, these couple of things that Amazon is doing already are extremely important and extremely interesting for us. I was talking about social transformations and social change. Society is not a unique mass. It's a lot of people. It's composed of a lot of people who want to experience diverse things and different things. When we ask, for example, 50,000 people, we ask them, how would you choose your medical provider or your hospital or your company? They say to us, I would choose them mostly because of their digital capabilities. Because if they can give a video remote consultation, if they have wearables that can monitor my health, there's a high percentage of the population who would desire this. And they would choose a hospital or a medical provider depending on this technology. Now, the generations where this is more pronounced is the Z generation, would be the Z generation. And I am talking about people who are 55 years old or less or younger understand the importance of this, and this is more than half of the population. Last year, I was telling you about a hospital in the United States, in Missouri, that really had they made a radical change in the way of practicing medicine. It's a hospital with 0 beds. What they do is they evolve this concept. We are citizens, we are patients, families, so therefore everything to do with healthcare goes around hospitals. So the importance of homes and work environments is not very high, but everything that happens between us and our patients has to be in hospitals. This means that attention is individualized, not personalized, but individualized, and with a great focus on the reaction rather than on prevention. Now, this is linked to the following image. We will think about things that doctors do in hospitals that could be done outside hospitals. What can I do outside hospitals that can balance out the things that the attention that I am giving within the hospital and within the patient's environment? Today, we have about 30 billion wearables, sensors, smartphones. Julia was explaining this in her presentation. And they have been sending data constantly that we can store, that we can use for artificial intelligence, and we can use this to say, if you're not getting any feedback, then you are fine, and then you need to go to hospital. And this is the evolution towards digital hospitals. Look at this. Look, people who think that this is nonsense, that this doesn't make any sense, that this is not going to go anywhere. People who are not, who look at these things in disbelief, I will remind you about the dean of the University of Berna, told Einstein that he was rejected for a PhD because his papers on light were too radical, and they were more to do with art than with physics. So, really, I will show you the hospital now.
10 years ago, Mercy made a promise to get healthcare right. We reached out to Epic to create our state-of-the-art EHR. We invited our physicians to become innovators. And we began working towards the goal of a new care model with compassion at its core. With almost a decade running one of the world's largest tele-ICUs, we introduced the world's first virtual care center. It's powered by exceptional caregivers, proprietary algorithms, and Epic's ability to deliver patient data in real time. Our products and services are designed with feedback from health systems from around the country, including our own. They fill common gaps in the care continuum, and the results speak for themselves.
Your doctor should be in just a minute. We're going to get ahead of that pain.
In 2016 alone, patients admitted to our tele-ICU program had 35% lower mortality and 35% fewer days in the hospital. This eliminated more than 40,000 ICU days and even more in other units. Costs were reduced by millions of dollars. But most importantly, almost 1,000 men and women went home who weren't expected to.
We've run the sepsis protocol, and there are some red flags.
Mercy's telehospitalist program responds to calls in less than a minute and usually resolves issues in less than 10. Virtual support removes bottlenecks and keeps care plans moving forward. With implementation, hospitals enjoy reduced labor cost, physicians experience less turnover, and patients get home faster.
And when did the baby's fever begin?
Another success story is our comprehensive care management program. Working closely with Epic, our team of highly experienced nurses use customized applications to care for patients with chronic conditions. Representative clients have enjoyed strong results with 22% fewer sick days, a 20% reduction in medical spend, and a 15% drop in hospital admissions. The program quickly improves patient health and quickly reduces healthcare costs.
It looks like your blood pressure is a little bit high right now, so let's talk about how you're feeling.
In the US, almost 50% of healthcare dollars is invested in only 5% of the population. A new care model must better respond to the seriously ill and prevent unnecessary hospitalizations. To address this need, Mercy Virtual created the innovative Engagement at Home program. This highly personalized approach bridges gaps in the care continuum. Working directly with patients, navigators reduced costs by an impressive 30% and cut hospital admissions by half. By consistent management of complex conditions, this program gives patients more autonomy and minimizes disruption in their daily lives. Data drives innovation, and it also drives us. Our portfolio of services drops septic shock deaths by 60%, reduces fault.
Okay, so this hospital reduces emergencies and mortality rates. They have lower costs, and they just thought about the things that they used to do in physical hospitals that could be done in a different way. They have an intensive care unit, a home-based intensive care unit. And really, it's about thinking about the people that you can have outside the hospital that require perhaps a more intensive monitoring, and their results are spectacular. Ultimately, the evolution to this type of hospital will always be supported by scientific evidence. I mean, you read papers on the first impact list and that prove that evidence that these little steps that we take along this way are evidence-based, and we have created part of this in our company. We have generated the first framework in literature. That means that we can do now video consultation. Last year we talked about virtual care, and this year I want to talk about artificial intelligence in this new version of hospitals. I'm not an engineer, but I am a user of artificial intelligence tools. And if we do this little exercise of thinking what we can improve, perhaps we can get better ideas. I mean, I see artificial intelligence as a machine, basically, that we're trying to train to develop human brain functions. These functions range from thinking to, depending on what I think or what I predict, then I act. It could be to see, to hear, to understand a text, to read, or to talk, to speak. There are examples, specific examples of this in artificial intelligence that we are using, all of us are using. And we will see them very quickly, very briefly in the next few minutes. The ability to predict and to have virtual assistants. So why Amazon in the United States? Everybody has a house with a garden. So why is Amazon sending a drone with your order and leaves that on the garden? And 80% of people are keeping that because they know. They know what we like even before we do. And that ability to predict what is going to happen is also useful for giving feedback. If you ask Siri something, sometimes without you even asking her, she'll give you feedback. I worked at the Virgen del Mar hospital, and I always go at the same time, and I open my PC at the same time, and because I don't remember my passwords, I go to my notes in my iPhone, and when I was going to touch my iPhone to check them out, there was a warning, an alert with a note with my passwords, without me even asking for them. Well, I don't know if maybe I shouldn't have told you about this, actually. I just realized, okay, forget about what I told you. Anyway, it is able to predict and to give you a recommendation. Now, this makes sense in this. I will explain. This is the curve where everything that is measurable is reflected. So if we talk about height, distribution of a population is organized more or less normally, and 50% of the population has a height which is below average, and the other 50% of the population has a height which is above average. So with knowledge, we get the same thing. Knowledge, the knowledge that we as a group, that we have, there's 50% who have less than average knowledge, and there's 50% of us who have above average. So it's the same with medical knowledge. Medical knowledge is broader, there are more publications, there are more papers out, and the same thing happens. Doctors know on the basis of this distribution. Some doctors know less than average, and some doctors know more than average. So where are you? Where do you stand? Below or above? When you go to the doctor, where would you like your doctor to be? Above 50% or below the 50%? So nowadays, this ability to predict, to gather data and to predict means that, for example, I can have an assistant who is able to gather the data that I need in order to make the decision I need to make for my patient. So really, ultimately, knowledge shouldn't be a problem for doctors. We should be more democratic. We should use this for supporting decisions. Now, the ability to see static images, you put at your face in front of your phone, and the phone knows that you are the owner, and then it allows you to access your banking application. Or, for example, if you look at a self-driving car, it's unbelievable how they move for kilometers on end without anybody driving it. Would you trust it? I mean, would you trust a self-driving car? If any of us go behind the wheel with 2 eyes and a brain, well, we have to remember that a self-driving car has many eyes, has a brain that never tires, it never gets distracted, and it is much safer, without any shadow of a doubt. So, also Face ID, if I want to get medical services, or the ability to perceive moving images. Can you imagine that surgery that Julia was telling us about, where the surgeon can be far away from the patient?
Da Vinci
Really?
maneja el doctor Moncada tan
Da Vinci that the Dr. Moncada uses so skillfully. Perhaps we don't need that many human hands behind everything. And that is just the ability of seeing very well. Now, this ability to see images, Antonio works with this, and there are now many different projects in artificial intelligence, which is 150 times quicker than us. It never gets tired, it never gets distracted, it can give us recommendations. And this application, I don't know if you know it, this is called Skin Vision, and it
no permite que tu teléfono tome la imagen y la envíe a la nube hasta que
you have a skin lesion, and with your phone,
la imagen va a la nube.
You can take an image of this, and it's moved to the cloud. This cloud is learning, and it has learned to diagnose skin cancer. So
un poquito mejor que el médico general.
It was a little bit better than the GP in diagnosing.
Que el dermatólogo.
After that, it was a little bit better than the dermatologist. And now it's a little bit better than the dermatologist specialized in skin cancer.
Reconocimiento de voz.
And it never
Otro de los
gets tired.
proyectos en los que
Voice
está
recognition.
trabajando la
This
compañía.
is another project where
Reconocimiento de
company
voz
is
que, por
developing.
ejemplo,
This voice recognition,
es el
Nuance,
soporte de
is
parte de los
a
asistentes
company
que
working
utilizamos.
with this,
Esa
and it's the
capacidad,
type of
cuando le hablamos
support
al teléfono y le
of the
preguntamos
platform
una
that we
cosa,
use
la
when
capacidad
we
de
look
entender lo que
at
le decimos es porque hay una compañía como
the
esta
phone,
detrás que
we
ahora
say
justo
something to our phone
se
and it
acaba de
recognizes
fusionar
our speech.
con Microsoft.
They are developing this
Mirad la
alongside
utilidad.
Microsoft.
Dedicamos los médicos el doble de
example,
tiempo al
doctors
papel y al
use
ordenador que a la
twice
persona
as
que
much
tenemos enfrente,
time
más del doble
with
de
the
tiempo.
computer and with papers
¿Os imagináis
than
quitar
with
los teclados?
people. So can you
Yo no
imagine
sé
if we
vosotros,
didn't
pero yo me
need
peleo con el teclado
keyboards
cada
anymore?
vez
Now
que
I have
escribo. ¿Os
tremendous
imagináis quitar el
fights
teclado de
with
la
my
consulta
keyboard.
y de que de mi conversación surja
Can you
un
imagine
informe?
not
Eso nos
needing a
permitirá
keyboard? And can you imagine
concentrarnos
just
en la
generating
persona más que en el papel o más que en
documentation
el
only
ordenador.
with your
Y, por
voice,
ejemplo, ahora
so
tenemos
you could
100
focus on
compañeros
your
de
patient?
Sanitas hospitales que van a
Now,
empezar
we have
a
100
utilizar en su
colleagues
práctica
in
habitual
Sanitas hospitals who
pues
will
esta
start
herramienta.
using this type of tool.
Y en esa capacidad de ver matices de la
In
voz, de ver
this
matices del sonido,
ability
esta es una
to
última
catching
publicación,
and
como os digo,
detecting
todo
different
aquello que va a ir
nuances
cambiando,
in
que son
sound
piececitas del
and
puzzle del
speech,
nuevo hospital que se está dibujando, siempre va a tener una evidencia científica
there is
detrás.
always going to be, this is
Esto
always
es
going
un
to be
ejemplo de cómo el análisis de la voz puede
scientifically
mejorar
based. There's
cómo
always
yo
scientific
le digo a una
evidence
persona si lo que
behind
me está
this.
contando es de riesgo o no de tener
Someone
un
I can
infarto.
detect if the
Al margen
person
de las
who is
preguntas que yo
talking
le
to
puedo
me is
hacer
at risk
y de lo
of
que yo
having
puedo
a heart
intuir
attack,
según
for
me
example.
cuenta, también los matices de su voz
I can also I can
me
include
van a ayudar a
the
entender aún mejor
nuance
y a
of in
clasificar el riesgo de
someone's voice,
de esa
in
persona. ¿Os
the
imagináis
information,
llamando
and the
a,
big
pues,
picture
al
that I'm
servicio de
getting about
emergencias
this
cuando
patient?
alguien
Can you
cuenta su
imagine in
problema, que te diga
emergencies,
también, oye,
someone
que
is having a
aquí hay un
problem,
warning,
and then they
que
can
esto
tell
suena,
you as
esto
well,
pinta mal.
look, there is a warning, this is not looking good.
Cuando hablamos de todos los cacharritos que llevamos y que
And when we
Juan
speak
Carlos
about
utiliza para
all the
aprender un
wearables
montón
we
de
carry,
las enfermedades
which Juan Carlos uses to
mentales,
learn about
como
mental
decía, hay más de 30.000 millones
diseases,
de dispositivos
there are
conectados en
over
el mundo.
30 billion
Un
connected
montón
devices in the world.
dispositivos.
There are
Un ejemplo de
many
algo
of them.
como esto, como el
Just to
Apple
set an
Watch,
example,
algunos de nosotros
I am
tenemos y que
sure
se da
many
para
of you
muchos-
have
para
an
muchos de
Apple
estos,
Watch
relojes
and
inteligentes.
or any
El
other
Apple Watch, por ejemplo, hace una
smartwatch.
cosa,
Well,
seguramente
regarding
muchos de vosotros
Apple
conocéis,
Watch,
pero
you
lo
may
recuerdo,
know this,
que
but
es
I
que
would just
identifica
like to
dónde está la posición
remind
de mi
it,
muñeca ahora,
is that
pero si en un momento determinado la posición
if
del reloj
the
cambia
position
y
of the
baja
watch
60
changes,
centímetros o 70 centímetros
let's
y
say
encima
60
dice, ha
centimeters
cambiado
up or
la posición del
down,
reloj y lo ha hecho con una
the
gravedad
app
determinada, una
knows
velocidad
that
determinada, el reloj
the
dice,
position of the
a lo mejor
watch
se ha caído.
has changed at a certain
persona que
speed,
porta este reloj,
so maybe the
si
watch
el reloj ha pasado al
identifies
suelo,
that
ha ido a la
the
altura del suelo
person
y lo ha hecho de forma
or
muy
the
rápida,
watch
no vale
fell to
hacer
the
así,
floor.
no
This is
sirve
not
eso.
enough.
Identifica que se ha caído la
But
persona,
it can
por haber
identify
caído,
that the
si se levanta,
person
pues,
has
no pasa
fallen.
nada. Pero si no hay respuesta durante
If
unos
there
segundos,
is
identifica que la caída ha sido por
no
algo importante que
response
pudiera
for a
haber sido
few
una pérdida de
minutes,
conciencia, o
then the
incluso una muerte
watch
súbita.
can identify
Ocurre en las
if the
personas que tienen un
person
infarto.
has
Pues hace
lost
en esa mente dos cosas.
consciousness
Estamos hablando de un
or
reloj
has
que
had
sirve
a
para
heart
la hora,
attack. So, and we're
para
talking
conectarnos
about a
WhatsApp,
watch
para ver el correo, para poner la música, y
aimed
además
at looking at the
está
time,
vigilando de
playing
forma invisible
music,
para nosotros
reading
y nos
messages,
está ayudando cuando tenemos
and
un problema
it is
determinado.
also
Otra cosa,
surveilling
como
us.
os
It is
decía,
also keeping an
llama
eye
al
on us
teléfono de
to
emergencias
see
de
that
emergencia
we
digital,
are okay.
del familiar
If
que
you
consideréis oportuno, y
call,
llama al servicio de
and it
urgencias.
can
Hay una
also
persona
call
con esta
your
geolocalización que ha
preferred
activado
contact, your emergency
el
contact,
protocolo
and
de
also
caída.
to the
Puede ser que tenga un
emergency
problema,
authorities
inmediatamente va
in
a los
order
servicios,
to tell them that
servicios de
this
emergencias de
person
los
may have
hospitales.
had,
Pero mirad,
may have
esta
fallen
es la
and
imagen
is
de un
having
TAC de
a
una mujer
problem.
de mediana edad,
This is a
que todo
CT
esto que se
scan
ve
of an adult female.
negro
Everything
es
in
el área de
black
un infarto
is
cerebral, de un
the
ictus que ha tenido esta mujer. No hace falta explicar mucho que lo que ha tenido es una cosa muy
a
grave.
brain
Sabéis que pues un ictus puede ser un
a
susto,
brain
te
attack.
puede dejar completamente incapacitado, te puede matar.
You know that
¿no?
a
Y con
stroke
muchísima frecuencia,
can kill
el
you,
ictus se debe a una arritmia
and
que vemos
suddenly
mucho en los
this
cardiólogos. Hay
stroke
casi un
is
millón de
due to
personas,
an
un millón de
arrhythmia.
personas en
Nearly
España
1 million
que la
people in
padecen,
Spain
y es una arritmia que, si
has
veis,
suffers
son
from this
latidos
arrhythmia,
son irregulares. No hay
where
siempre la misma
the
distancia
pulse, the
entre,
heart
entre
rate
dos rayitas,
is
¿no? Es una
different,
arritmia
vary
que es un
from
poco puñetera para
one
algunos
to
de
another. And it is
Vale,
very
pues
difficult to identify because
relojito
it's minor.
han publicado un
So
estudio en el que hace lo siguiente.
there is a
Cuando hay un
study
latido
that
que no es
says
regular,
that
o sea, yo tengo un
whenever
latido,
we
por
have a
ejemplo,
regular
cuando viene un latido que no es
an
regular,
irregular
dices,
pulse
uy, esto puede ser eso que me han
and
dicho,
never a
de que con
beat,
dos latidos irregulares puede haber una arritmia detrás. Entonces
then
aplica un
the
algoritmo,
watch
el
applies
algoritmo
an
de latidos
algorithm
irregulares.
in
Normalmente,
order
si
to
los 6
identify
latidos, 5
irregular
son
beats.
irregulares,
So
dice,
if
esto es
5 out
una
of
fibrilación auricular,
7
y pone en contacto
heartbeats
al
are
paciente,
irregular,
al estudio,
then
al paciente con
the
un médico.
patient
Es decir,
is
un elemento de nuestra vida cotidiana
in touch with the
nos va a
doctor.
ayudar a vigilarnos.
And this is
que
something we
sea,
use in our
algo
daily
positivo para
lives.
nosotros.
We're not even aware
Va a enviar la
of the fact
información,
that this
y
watch
la
is
persona va a recibir la
keeping
atención
an eye on
correspondiente.
us. The watch is going to
Mirad, el
send this
procedimiento de lenguaje
information
natural
and the
es lo que
patient
os
will
decía,
receive the care he
los
or
médicos
she
escribimos
needs.
mucho y a veces es difícil extraer información valiosa de nuestros estudios.
We
Hoy en día existe la
write a
posibilidad de
lot
extraer
and we
de
study a
todo lo
lot,
que
and it is
escribimos
quite
la
difficult to
información
extract
relevante.
relevant
Por
information
ejemplo,
from
para
all
hacer
the
estudios
papers which are published. Now we can extract that relevant information Finally, the ability to mimic human voice. As you know, Google published Google Duplex. You tell your phone, please make an appointment with the hairdresser's salon. I even do this. And the app, the smartphone, doesn't do this just sending a text. The smartphone mimics a human voice in order to interact with the hairdresser's salon in order to make an appointment. So the person in the hairdressers doesn't even know if it is a human voice or a robotic voice. Can you imagine this in hospitals? Julia was talking about the emotional avatar or something related to it. If we are talking about a hospital whose knowledge is on the cloud and which is receiving information, is going to give a recommendation to a person. Can you imagine this recommendation being made by a mimicked human voice? It's a recognizable human voice that elderly people would appreciate, for example. When doctors are asked, half of us in this survey, half of over 3,000 colleagues say that they find many applications of AI in their fields in order to support the decision-making, in the diagnosis. Many uses can be applied. But at this point, we are a bit afraid. Can artificial intelligence make doctors obsolete? My answer to this is the following.
Solving in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, yeah. Lo mejor es el oye.
Who has managed to solve a Rubik cube before? Please raise your hand. Raise your hand.
Solving in 3, 2, 1.
Para mí la moraleja es la siguiente.
We need to keep this in our minds. There are some machines that can carry out super fast tasks in order to give humans more time to devote to other things. AI is going to give us many things. It is going to help us in our work, and it is going to give us time that right now we do not have in order to better provide a better care to our patients. So if machines are devoted to those tasks which are not as relevant as others, then we will have time to other more important things. And then we will be able to carry out a more human medicine where the role of physicians are going to go back to their roots. Physicians will be chosen regarding their human abilities, because right now we say, well, I don't like him at all, but he's super good in his job. He doesn't even look at me, but he's super good. However, right now, thanks to technology, we will be chosen thanks to empathy, sympathy, the ability to communicate, and this will be helpful for a more human medicine. And this is the last video of what technology attracts.
She packed my bags last night, pre-flight. 0 hour, 9 a.m.
Ese soy yo con el Apple Watch.
That's me with Apple Watch.
As a kite by then. It's lonely out in space. On such a timeless flight. I think it's gonna be a long, long time. And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Al principio ha sido un poco torpe. Las otras le miraban como
It
diciendo,
was a
"Esta
bit clumsy in the beginning, and the other
no va por el
ostriches
camino."
were looking
Pero al
at
final ha
it
conseguido
as,
hacer,
what is he
lo que
doing?
parecía que era imposible-
But in the
que era
end,
imposible
it
hacer, ¿no?
managed to do what
Em,
seemed impossible.
La última diapo.
This is the last slide.
Pues o sea, esto al final es el camino que
In
estamos
the
siguiendo
end,
ya,
this is
la
the
medicina
path
de forma
we're
a veces muy
following.
sutil. Parece muy complejo
Sometimes
el
medicine
pensar,
evolves in a subtle
vamos a hacer,
way.
o sea, cambiar radicalmente
It
el
can
concepto
be
del hospital.
complex to think that
Pero
we are going
fijaros,
to
y no es,
completely
no me
change
gustaría
the
hacer un
concept
spam
of
de la compañía, pero es
hospitals.
importante reconocer
I do
todos
not
los pasos
like
que
to
entre
do
todos
and spam of the
estamos
company,
dando.
but I
Ya
would
estamos
like to
haciendo muchas
recognize
piezas
all
de
the
este puzzle
steps we're
del
taking
hospital
forward,
digital.
and
Tenemos
we
un
are
programa de salud conectada
building
que
the
básicamente es
puzzle of
personas, 800
more
y pico,
connected
que tienen un
hospitals.
dispositivo
There are
que les vigila en su
over
casa y reciben
800
feedback por
people
nuestra
which
parte.
are
Tenemos un servicio de
which
promoción de la
have
salud que tiene programas
feedback
personalizados en los que
a
igual
feedback
personas en
device at
su
their
entorno habitual
houses.
reciben
There are some
un
people
apoyo por
that
parte de
receive
la compañía. Tenemos
support by the
asistentes
company. We
virtuales.
have virtual
Casi el
assistants.
9%
Nearly
de
9%
los
of
pacientes digitales que
digital
tenemos ya hacen
patients
consulta, todas las consultas son por videoconsulta.
only
Bajamos
have
esos informes por voz, es
video
decir,
consultations. We are
pasito a
also
pasito
carrying
se está
out
construyendo ese hospital
reports
diferente que va a dar esa
via
medicina que necesitan
voice
hoy en día,
recognition. So
nuestros
we're taking
pacientes.
steps
Y eso lo vamos a
towards
seguir
a
construyendo
future medicine,
entre
and
todos. A mí
I'm
cuando,
sure that
cuando me dicen,
if we
"¿Tú
all
qué le
work
dirías
together,
bajo tu punto
we
de vista
will be able
a
to
otros
build
médicos
this future?"
que
When
estaban?"
I'm asked,
Y yo
what would
siempre
you
digo
tell
lo
other
mismo,
doctors to do?
los
I
médicos tenemos
always
que seguir
reply
haciendo lo
in
que
the
hemos
same
hecho
way.
siempre,
We
que
need
es
to keep on
estudiar,
doing what
trabajar con
we
nuestros
have done,
pacientes y
to keep on
adaptarnos
studying,
a
to
los
work
cambios y a los
with
tiempos
our
para ofrecer
patients, and
la
to
mejor
adapt
medicina posible.
ourselves to the
Muchas
new
gracias y le
times
toca a
and new
Jorge, ¿no?
technologies to provide the best medicine possible. Thank you, and enjoy your lunch.
Despide, despide.
Del abrazo, las caricias y esa resonancia positiva. Vamos a
Oh,
acabar ya.
yeah,
Yo
it
voy a
was
llamar a
great.
José Francisco Tomás para que
I think this is the end. I'm going to call José Francisco Tomás to close this gathering. And after such a wonderful day, but he doesn't need any introduction. I only want to express my gratitude to everyone, to speakers, and to the audience, because it is quite difficult to keep on being paying attention after 4 hours. It's the 19th year we hold this event, and things have changed a lot from the first conference we held. And this is part of our lives. In Sanitas, we do this in order to share the excitement involved in working in the health field. And being humble, we want to contribute to making things better and to offer what the new era demands from us, and in order to face all the challenges ahead of us. Thank you very much for being here, for your help, and for the excitement that you always show with us. Thank you very much, and let's have lunch.